Hey, everybody. Today for you, podcast number 74. Today's podcast is titled, Everyone Can Do These 5 Things. Hey, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of your weekly Limitless Life Network podcast. I'm Dr. Pete Lombardi, and sitting next to me is the lovely Sandy Lombardi.
Hello.
And this is the Limitless Life Network, where we flesh out the limitations that are preventing you from reaching your goals and living the life that you were called to lead. And last week's podcast, I think, was a pretty big hit. What do you think?
Yeah, we had a lot of questions that came in privately about eating carnivore.
Yeah, that was cool. It was really cool. And Sandy actually recorded. Well, we recorded together. She was the sole person in front of the camera yesterday. And we put it on the YouTube channel, how to make bone broth. And it took her like 2 minutes to make it. And check it out if you're interested in learning the simple recipe of making bone broth. And super delicious and really nutritious. So so thank you for being listeners. Thank you for liking, following, sharing, subscribing. I know I had a couple of people said that they shared last week's podcast with a bunch of their friends. So that's super cool. And if you're a new listener, welcome aboard. We love having you here. And that's great. So let's get on with the show. And we've got some more cool things for you this week. And I think these are actionable items. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And we titled it, Everyone Can Add These 5 Things. I had another title that was, according to the title analyzer, a better title to use, but it kind of came off as a negative spin. So I didn't want to use that, neither did Sandy. We like to stay positive. So, the backstory is there's not a lot of backstory. Except I think last week I digested a lot of different content. I digested a lot of resource, and I went through, and I don't know, I just every once in a while I fill my brain with a ton of new research and information, and I love to purvey. I love to pass it on after I've run it through my filter. And hopefully I boil it down and break it down into something that's more meaningful and simple, because sometimes you can get overwhelmed with too much information.
Right.
Okay. So what's our first one?
Number 1 was get outside for the morning and evening sun.
Okay. Well, that seems like very generic, right? But here's the reason why. And we're going to talk about this with point number 2 as well. The morning and evening sun is much different than the midday sun. And it has to do with the color spectrum of light. And in the morning sun, the rays of the sun are more in the red and orange range. And that's why we see those beautiful sunsets and the beautiful sunrises. And that's the best time for us to look into the sun without any sunglasses or anything else. It's not damaging to your eyes if you look into the sun in the beginning of the day and at the end of the day. And the reason is it's very good for our eyes to get the photons directly from the sun. Now, I will say that you do not get the same photon delivery to your eyes looking through glass. So if you look out the window in the morning and you see a sunrise and you stare at the sunrise, that's all well and good, but you're not getting the photon transmission into your eyes.
Okay.
And the same thing in the evening. So that's critical, and it really helps with our brain's physiology. And our brain really, really needs to see that morning sun and that evening sun to set our circadian rhythms. And we're going to talk about that in point number 2. And that influences our hormones. It can influence our sleep. It can influence all kinds of different functions in the body. But it is a very simple hack for anybody to do.
And did you see how long they recommended? Like 10 minutes or?
Well, I mean, until it gets too bright, yeah. I mean, if you can do it for, 30 minutes, that's
Okay.
fantastic. But even if it's just for 5 or 10 minutes, it's better than staying inside and not getting it at
hmm
all.
It makes me think back. There's been seasons where I've had the time and I've gone out for a walk early morning as the sun was coming up and didn't realize it at the time, but super, I think, made me feel connected, with God and nature. And there was a lot behind it that I didn't even realize.
Yeah, it's the one of the reasons that you feel that calmness and that soothing of watching the sun come up through its whole cycle of sunrise is just that very thing, is that those photons reach into our brain and stimulate it in such a way that that's what we need. We're created to see that. So
Okay.
in our modern world, we have kind of remove that from the equation of our daily life.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can simply add it back in.
Yep. Okay.
Okay. So that's the whole purpose of this. It's much easier to add things into your life than it is to take them away.
hmm
So that brings us to point number 2.
Which is block the blue light.
Block the blue light. Well, a lot of people have heard of blue light blockers, right?
Blue light glasses.
Blue light glasses. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about here. Because of those different wavelengths, it's important to understand that at different parts of the day, our eyes are designed to take a certain amount of light. And in the Northeast here, we tend to look at light early in the morning via television, via a phone, via a computer screen, and also in the evening we do that. And those are the times when we need to be getting more of the red light. And so that light that's being transmitted to our eyes at those times of the day is really not good for our circadian rhythms. It's really not good for our sleep patterns. And I'm going to recommend that everybody does is that anybody that's looking at a phone, a television, a Kindle, and you're looking at that early in the day or toward the end of your day, you should go out and get a pair of blue light blocker glasses, and you should get the red. There's different prescriptions. And I'm going to recommend that you go to the website blockbluelight.com. And they have either yellow lenses or red lenses. So the red lenses are meant to be worn in the morning and the evening, and the
Okay.
yellow lenses in the middle of the day if you're in front of a screen.
And I learned that all blue light glasses are not created equal because I had ordered the kids some last Christmas on Amazon and we can't tell whether they're red, yellow.
Yeah, most of the Amazon ones that you buy that are blue light blockers don't block any blue light, unfortunately, or they block very minimal amounts. So it's much more worth it to spend the money on the better ones that actually work and serve the purpose that you want. Plus, I looked at the website and there's some pretty stylish glasses there. So highly recommend that. We're in the process of ordering ours. So there you go. That brings us to point number
3,
3.
pay attention to your feet.
Well, that's a
Taking a
weird one.
different twist here.
Yeah, we're going from the eyes to the feet. Okay, so now anybody that's ever had foot problems knows that it hurts every time you step on your foot. And sometimes even when you're not even stepping on your foot, it hurts. But those of us that don't necessarily have any acute symptomatic problems with our feet probably have weak feet, and we don't even know it. And that's because most of our entire lives we walk around on hard, level surfaces, floors. And in our house we have tile, we have hardwood, and we have some carpet. But by and large, everything is flat and everything is hard. And over time, that causes your feet to get weaker. It puts more and more stress on the ligaments in your feet. But even worse than all of that is that it puts very poor input as far as what's called proprioception into your brain. And proprioception is the brain's awareness of your body and the position of your body in time and space. So how important is to know where you put your hand, where you put your foot, and how you control it. And you may think, well, that I don't even realize that I don't have strong feet, and you probably don't. But if you've ever walked around outside barefoot, and you normally don't walk outside barefoot, your feet are probably very tender. And if you walk on uneven ground it probably feels very awkward and sometimes even painful for you. And that's probably because your feet are weak. So this brought along, go ahead.
Well, would that also indicate, like, if you have poor ankle strength, that would be right brought about because of lack of proprioception
Yes,
okay.
that's 100%. If you twist your ankles easily, you more than likely have weak feet or very poor proprioception.
Okay.
When I was in chiropractic college, we had a professor there, Dr. Russ Ebbets. And Dr. Russ Ebbets, I see him periodically still to this day, was a coach as well as a doctor. And he coached basketball and he coached track and field and mostly track and field. And he's very well known in that circle. But he talked about foot drills for his athletes. And by introducing foot drills to a basketball team that, say, would have 80% ankle sprains during a season, or 80% of the kids are spraining their ankle, by the next year after implementing foot drills, they brought it down to 5%. So it's a significant thing that you can do to increase proprioception and strength of the feet. And I think you're probably going to ask me about that, weren't you?
Well, I know you've got Grace doing some work on a pole, like it's.
Oh yeah, that too. Yeah. So foot drills are simple. Anybody can do these, and it's best done outside. But if it's wintertime and there's snow on the ground, you probably don't want to do it outside because you should do them barefoot. But you can do them in your own home with your socks on. Basically, walk on your toes for 25, 30 steps, and then walk on your heels for 25 or 30 steps, and then walk on the outsides of your feet. Walk on the insides of your feet, which is very awkward to do. Walk with your toes pointed in and walk with your toes pointed out.
Okay.
And if you do that periodically, 3 or 4 times a week, you will develop more strength in your feet and you will also develop more brain body awareness of the lower part of your body.
And we do have a lot of friends that their girls dance, and I know they've been talking about lots of issues with their feet. So these would be good tips for them to work on at home.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think there was something else I wanted to mention about the feet. Oh, your feet also influence your posture. I don't know if you knew that.
Didn't know that.
Yeah. So what ends up happening is as you lose an arch in a foot, then your knee rolls in, and then your hip kicks out, and you continue to walk like that, and then your pelvis shifts, your spine shifts, and everything shifts, including your head. Because our brains are programmed to always keep your eyes gazing evenly on the horizon. And so whatever it takes, whatever starts to break down in the mechanical chain from your foot to your eyes, your brain will adapt and it will change the tension and tone of the muscles that hold your posture. And posture is a learned neurologic response. So you can't really change somebody's posture unless you change the underlying neurology. And oftentimes that's one of the ways we shift people's posture is by working first with the feet to get the posture to change.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen you do that.
So, yeah. And that brings us to point number
5.
Point number 5.
Can I even, oh wait, no, number 4.
Number 4. Yeah.
Your
sorry.
environment. We're going to talk about the environment that you're in.
Yeah. So your environment is where your body is at any given moment. So we are in the Limitless Life Network podcast studio environment right now. So we're sitting on something hard. We've got microphones in front of us. We've got these lights shining down on us and looking at a camera. So that's our environment right now. And when we first started doing this, it made us a little nervous and it caused our nervous system to react in a certain way. We're both much more calm in front of a camera with a microphone in front of us. And because of that, it's changed our nervous system. So we've adapted to this environment.
True.
And that's exactly what you do. You adapt to your environment, every environment that you're in. So the question is your environment good for you or is it not good for you? That's really the basic question here. And let me give you an example. We know a friend of ours who, there are 2 friends, a couple that we're friends with, who recently took in a foster child. And this foster baby was born into a very difficult situation, a very non-nurturing environment and was not doing well. Very, very small because the baby was not being fed well, not being taken care of well, and just in a state of like,
Sympathetic,
yeah,
fight or flight.
fight or flight.
Right.
And then the baby was brought to our friends because they took this child in to raise it. And lo and behold, within no time at all, because the home environment is loving, caring, clean, nurturing, great food, you name it, the baby's got everything. The baby is thriving, putting on
Didn't they
weight.
say it was like 24 hours? I really, I was like, wow, that's really amazing when you think just how critical the environment is. Makes sense.
Yeah. Well, with a newborn baby, 24 hours can make all the difference in the world. Right. So,
Yeah, the baby was what? How old when?
I think 4 weeks or 5 weeks, but only for like 5 pounds.
Yeah.
And yeah, she's doing fantastic now.
Yeah, so I think the environment you're in, it could be for us adults at work, whether it's a challenging environment and your brain is being stimulated, or is it so routine, you're doing the same thing day in and day out, and there's very little stimulation, like that's not probably a productive environment for you. Your home, is it peaceful, or is there tension and fighting? All of those things are important to look at.
Yeah. And I think for many of us, our environments are not stimulating. In other words, we're not working on trying to grow. We're just kind of kicking the can and we're just doing the same things day in and day out. It becomes very routine, especially with adults, right? So that brings us to point number 5, and I will not ask you to try to pronounce this. So
Thank you.
Point number 5 comes from a podcast that I listen to periodically called the Huberman Lab podcast. And Dr. Huberman is a neuroscientist, and he interviewed a pretty famous guy today named David Goggins, who's a Navy SEAL. He's known for being an ultra marathon runner, but he's most known for what?
He just does everything hard. It's
Right.
like
So that's
the
like
harder the challenge.
Yeah. That's
I had read one of his books.
Yeah, that's his thing. Is he always tells people stay hard, right? So that's his thing. But Dr. Huberman listened to David Goggins tell a story for about an hour, and he said, "I've got something to share with you." And this was exciting, and I'm driving along, and I'm like getting all excited myself because I geek out to this stuff. And he mentioned a structure in the brain called the anterior mid-cingulate cortex. And this is a brain structure. So it's a physical thing. And Dr. Huberman described it as that's a noun, that's no big deal, but the verb is what's important. What does it do? And let me just read you what he said. He said that human data shows that when people do something that they don't want to do, this brain area gets bigger. So when we do things that we don't want to do, this part of our brain grows. The anterior mid-cingulate cortex is small in obese people. It gets bigger when they diet. And it's larger in athletes. And it is especially large and grows larger in people that see themselves as challenged and overcome some challenge. In people who live a very long time, this area seems to keep its size. Scientists view the anterior mid-cingulate cortex as not just the seat of willpower, but actually the seat of the will to live. And we can build up this area, but as quickly as we can build it up, when we stop investing in doing the things that are hard for us, it begins to shrink.
Powerful.
So I think what I love about this is that there's a direct correlation with how hard you're really pushing yourself. And it really speaks to me about that feeling of like we get to these states of comfort, and that's exactly when we start to degrade and our lives start to go downhill, but we're comfortable so we don't even notice it. And it happens gradually, it happens subtly, and the next thing you know, it's 10 years later and you just can't do what you used to do. And you just don't feel as good as you used to feel because you're not doing things that are hard anymore.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It made me think we came back from our trip to Colorado, and it looks like we may be helping Nate and Sam and taking care of Brooks on a fairly regular basis. And I was super excited. And then the reality set in a little bit. And I said to Pete, this is going to be really kind of time consuming and hard to juggle. And I'm like, that's what I wanted. And why am I feeling that way? And he's like, I really thrive when things are hard. It's going to be great. Now, it's funny. That was before you stumbled upon this week. And it's true. Like, I think human nature, we can start to get in a rhythm where, okay, it's starting to get a little, I have things under control. And then, but I want these new things. And then when the realities are coming, I get a little bit like, oh, but it's to push through that and really embrace the next challenging thing in your life and constantly growing.
Yeah. And so what ends up happening though is that things that are hard eventually will become easy. But don't be like, oh, I did the hard thing and I'm done.
Right.
Because that's when that anterior mid-cingulate cortex begins to shrink now.
That was the point I think he was making to David Goggins. Like, he achieved these hard things, but they were no longer hard to him. So he had to find the next thing.
Yeah.
Right?
And he's constantly reminding himself that there's still things that are hard. And he's still got to go find those hard things to do.
Right.
And I realize it's taken me a long time, but I realize that I do best when I have something that I really have to work hard at. And I know that you guys will too, because your brain is going to develop better pathways, but the anterior mid-cingulate cortex is not only an area that's going to speak to your longevity, but it's a sign of whether you're really living or dying.
Great.
Yeah. So that's all we have for this week's edition of your weekly Limitless Life Network podcast. Be sure to tune in each and every week so you can stay connected, be inspired, and keep moving toward your best life by stripping away your limitations. And we will see you next week.
Have a great one.